Hello, I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today we want to go back to Iraq because the drama continues to unfold there as we knew it would. And as I brought up in my last video, there's no surprise that the ISIS group, the militant group in Iraq, would move very aggressively to take advantage of the momentum they've gained by taking over the second largest city in Iraq, Mosul or Mosul. And now it turns out they've also taken Tikrit, but there seem to be conflicting reports that the Iraqi army has taken back Tikrit. But as far as I know, Tikrit is still in the hands of ISIS, and they are moving south and north. And they've already taken the Baiji refinery. That's been captured in the north. And we also have some other dramatic events happening in the north with Kurdish forces. But I'm actually going to do a separate video on that because it's an important ingredient in this, and a rather striking one. And so what we have so far is some of the numbers are rolling in, and we still don't have any casualty counts, but we do find out that a total of 30,000 Iraqi troops in total retreated, 10,000 just around Mosul. And now we're also getting confirmations that a massive amount of United States equipment, including helicopters and artillery and tanks, has been left behind and could very well be commandeered. And in fact, there's already video surfacing of these commandeered vehicles. And interestingly enough, ISIS is not only using weapons that they got from the U.S. in Syria against the Iraqi government in Iraq, but now apparently they are taking some of the weapons that they're getting in Iraq and taking those back into Syria. And that's another part of this battle that is going to fuel this war in Iraq for some time to come. And one reason why we're going to see this extend over, once again, weeks, months, and perhaps years, because of the porous border with Syria. And now we have ISIS moving back and forth with fighters and weapons between Syria and Iraq. And in fact, apparently, considering the territory that they've gained in Syria, there's a certain amount of stability, and they've actually been focusing their efforts in Iraq more than Syria. One note suggested that for every 100 attacks in Syria, they were doing 1,000 attacks in Iraq. And to give you an idea of the scale, we now have 2 million refugees on the move. So that's a massive scale as well. And one of the things about the scale that's interesting is reports are that the initial force moving into Mosul and that region of Tikrit is only 1,000 to 2,000 fighters. But then, of course, we have 1,000 to 3,000 prisoners who are freed. And then we also have the collaboration of Sunni insurgents that have been operating in Mosul, in Anbar, and Nineveh for pretty much most of the Iraqi war, going back to the initial U.S. invasion. And so this is a collaboration of ISIS and the Sunni resistance. And that's another thing that's going to give it a lot of longevity and probably a fair amount of success, is this collaboration between foreign fighters and the Sunni resistance. And one of the other things that's interesting that's happened is that Mosul's central bank's been captured. So it seems to me that perhaps we could see a fair amount of Iraqi gold, if there's any left after the U.S. was done with them. See if ISIS gets their hands on Iraqi gold. And so then we have the failure of the Iraqi army, and apparently they bailed on Tikrit as well. And ironically, reports say the Iraqi army has little capability and is already overstretched. And in fact, they're apparently pulling troops from Anbar to protect Baghdad. And so that will only weaken that flank as the resistance moves in, and will only weaken the Iraqi position, government position in the long run, or even in the short run. But that's how badly positioned the Iraqi army is right now, that they actually have to expose themselves in Anbar, where they have an ongoing conflict with ISIS, in order to protect Baghdad. And Iraq is also exposed to ISIS in Syria, as I mentioned earlier. No matter how much they may be able to have any victories in the field, they're going to find ISIS moving in and out of Syria, and that will make them very effective against the Iraqi government. And the Peshmerga are mobilized, but of course the question becomes for defense or offense. I can guarantee you Kurdistan in the north is mobilized and ready defensively, as they have been since the Syrian conflict started, and now in Iraq as well. But it'll be interesting to see if the Iraqi government can convince the Kurdish forces to help in the siege of Mosul, or help out the Iraqi government. As it turns out, Kurdish forces have moved outside of Kurdistan, but they've moved into Kirkuk. They haven't relieved the siege of Mosul. So that's an interesting turn of events, and I'll get more to that later. And so the question is, what's the U.S. going to do? U.S. troops left Iraq in 2011, and there are only a handful of trainers left, and of course mercenaries, and there's a lot of mercenaries guarding oil pipelines and oil refineries. But apparently the U.S. is considering airstrikes and surveillance. And Maliki was requesting surveillance and airstrikes last month, because this war has been going on for a while. It's just the tides have turned quickly. That's why one of the things that's ironic is that USA Today, for example, is Iraq heads for civil war. And they've already been in a civil war. They have been pretty much since the U.S. invasion. And this is just the latest phase. And in a lot of ways, it's not necessarily civil war, because we have a lot of foreign fighters. And so it's much more than that. And so the U.S. has already evacuated an air base used for training in the north. So they're getting the fuck out of Dodge too. And then of course the political parade that's going on in the United States. John Boehner is already critical of how Obama has handled the situation in Iraq right now. He said he should be more aggressive, and yet the very same Republicans are promising to stop any effort by Obama to support Iraq right now. And so anyway, but I don't want to go into that. I want to focus in on these dramatic events in Iraq. And so will the U.S. make sure Baghdad doesn't fall? And what's at play in Baghdad? Well, we have the same Sunni Shia division, so there's a certain possibility that the city itself could descend into some sectarian conflict, or is there any possibility that the Iraqi army, is there anything in the Iraqi army that can resist an onslaught of ISIS? And considering the encouragement of and success of this campaign, seems to me a lot more Sunnis are going to rise up, and a lot more foreign fighters are going to arrive. And who knows, maybe a whole bunch of yahoos are going to leave Libya and head over to Iraq. Why not? And so then the question becomes, what else could happen? Iran actually has the same interests as the U.S. right now. Iran would like to see stability in Iraq, and I'm sure they'll do whatever they can to help the situation. There's been talk of an Iranian intervention, but I think that's unlikely. It's just too controversial and asking for trouble. And then there's the question of what Turkey will do. We now have Turkish nationals who are affected by this onslaught, and so they have a vested interest here. Plus, they have a good relationship with northern Iraq as far as the Kurdistan region, and so they will have some skin in this game. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And there's been suggestions before, even from Vice President Biden, that perhaps Iraq should be split into a Shia section and Sunni section, and the state of Kurdistan, and it may well end up that way anyway. But we know one thing for sure. this isn't going to end anytime soon. So stay tuned. Baghdad could conceivably fall within days if things keep going the way they are. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?